I watched my father dump white powder into my champagne glass at my own graduation party, and I had about 3 seconds to decide if I was going to drink it or not. That's it. That's the moment that changed everything. His hand didn't shake. His smile didn't falter. He just tilted this little vial over my glass like he was seasoning a dish, and then he walked away like nothing happened. The crazy part? Nobody saw it. The orchestra kept playing. Guests kept laughing. My sister Lauren stood right next to me, completely oblivious, reaching for her own drink. And me? I just stood there holding this glass, feeling my heart hammer in my chest, realizing that my own father, the man who raised me, who paid for my education, who was supposed to protect me, had just tried to poison me. But here's the thing. This didn't come out of nowhere. I wish I could say it did. I wish I could say I was shocked. But I wasn't. Because 20 minutes earlier, I'd overheard something I was never supposed to hear. Let me back up. My name is Marin, and growing up in the Wilson family meant learning your place early. And my place was always behind my sister Lauren. Our house wasn't just a home, it was a shrine to her achievements. The walls were covered with her framed certificates, her trophies, her glossy photos standing next to judges and coaches. My stuff was there too, but always lower on the wall, always smaller, always slightly crooked. Even the house seemed to understand the hierarchy. When I was 12, I won the state science fair. I'd spent weeks testing water samples from nearby creeks, charting chemical runoff on poster board, working on the kitchen floor while everyone else slept. The morning the results came in, I walked into the dining room holding that blue ribbon like it actually mattered. My father, Matthew, didn't even look up from his tablet. My mother, Catherine, just kept reading her newspaper. Lauren was already dressed for her debate tournament, hair perfectly pinned the way Mom liked it. That's expected, Matthew said, not even glancing at me. A Wilson should excel. Expected. Not acknowledged. Just expected. Catherine finally looked at the ribbon, not at me, at the ribbon. Your hair looks messy in the picture, she said. Next time, stand straighter. Cameras pick up everything. That night, Lauren's debate trophy went on the center shelf. My ribbon got clipped behind a framed photo of her in a tennis uniform. It stayed there for years, half hidden, collecting dust. I remember checking on it sometimes. Like maybe if I looked at it enough, it would matter to someone besides me. It never did. That was my childhood. Every holiday choreographed around Lauren's accomplishments. Every dinner conversation tilting toward her achievements like water finding its level. My achievements were just logistical updates, scores that needed no applause because they were normal for a Wilson. When I applied to study environmental science instead of business, everything shifted. Matthew called it a waste. Catherine said no serious person would choose a field with no future. Lauren just hovered in the doorway while they lectured me, eyes soft but silent. I learned something important that day. Compassion without action still feels like abandonment. The summer before college, I interned with an environmental nonprofit instead of the family company. Big mistake. Or maybe the best decision I ever made. At breakfast one morning, Matthew read the email I'd sent declining their internship offer. He set his spoon down so carefully the metal barely touched the porcelain. If you insist on embarrassing this family, he said, voice cold, you'll pay for your own mistakes. I nodded, went upstairs, and filled out a student loan application. The air in my room felt different that day. Lighter. Like something had finally been named out loud. The night before I left for college, Catherine folded my clothes with the same precision she used for Lauren's business trips. Not a word about the future. Not a hug. Not even a lingering look. Just a gentle tug on a loose thread on my sleeve, her mouth tight in quiet disapproval. It wasn't cruelty, exactly. It was something sharper, a razor so smooth, so consistent, it almost felt polite. Fast forward 4 years. I graduated top of my class in environmental science. I had a job lined up with a restoration group. I had my own apartment waiting. And I had a trust fund that was set to activate the week after graduation, money my grandmother had left me that my parents couldn't touch. That trust fund was supposed to give me independence. Real independence. And that, I think, is what scared them most. But the night of my graduation party, everything fell apart. The party was on this fancy rooftop downtown. String lights everywhere, full orchestra, champagne towers, the whole thing. Very Wilson family style, all show, no substance. I needed to use the restroom, but the main one had a line wrapped around the bar. So I went looking for the service restroom near the back kitchen. The hallway was narrow, lit by one flickering bulb. It smelled like citrus cleaner and overheated metal. That's when I heard my parents' voices. Low, clipped, urgent. She can't have access to that trust, Catherine whispered. Not when everything is already unstable. I froze mid-step, my hand on the wall to steady myself. It activates next week, Matthew replied. If she's independent, she can talk. About the waste. The reports. The water samples. You know what that means. My heart started pounding so hard I thought they'd hear it. If she's hospitalized, even briefly, the transfer stalls, he continued. And if something worse happens before the paperwork clears. Catherine inhaled sharply. Matthew. It's precision, he cut her off. A controlled setback. Nothing lethal unless she reacts badly. We just need time. I stood there in that dim hallway, hand frozen on the restroom door handle, and felt something burn through my chest. Not panic. Not fear. Clarity. Cold, sharp clarity. They weren't talking about punishing me. They were talking about stopping me. Permanently if necessary. I stepped back before they could round the corner and walked back to the party in a daze. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. My hands were shaking, but I shoved them in my pockets so no one would notice. Everything looked different after that. The string lights seemed harsher. The laughter felt hollow. Catherine's perfect smile looked like a mask she'd been wearing my entire life. And then I saw him. Matthew. Standing by the champagne table. Talking to the head waiter like a proud father celebrating his daughter's achievement. I watched him choose a glass from the tray. Watched his wrists tilt slightly. Watched something white and powdery swirl into the champagne, sinking to the bottom like a secret settling into place. He set it on the family tray, the one reserved for me, Lauren, and my parents, and stepped back like he'd just completed a tradition. My sister appeared beside me, laughing at some joke a cousin made. She didn't notice Matthew watching me. Didn't notice the way his eyes tracked the waiter carrying that tray toward us. The waiter extended the tray. I reached for my glass, the one meant for me. My hand stopped. And in that split second, I thought about everything. Every ribbon they'd ignored. Every achievement they'd dismissed. Every time they'd made me feel like I didn't matter. I thought about that trust fund. About the environmental reports I'd been collecting. About the damage their company had done that they'd spent years covering up. I thought about what would happen if I just disappeared. And I made a choice. Here, I said to Lauren, smiling. Casual. Light. Take mine. It's the nicer pour. She didn't question it. Why would she? I'd spent our whole lives making things easier for her. She lifted the glass, clinked it gently against mine, and drank. I felt nothing in that moment. Not shock. Not guilt. Not triumph. Just this quiet, heavy certainty that whatever came next had already started. I watched her take that first sip and I didn't look away. I needed to see it. Needed to know this was real. When Lauren's knees buckled, the party didn't go silent all at once. It rippled. First a gasp near the orchestra. Then silverware clattering. Then the dull thud of her glass hitting the stone floor. By the time I reached her, her skin had gone pale under the lights. Her breathing was thin, irregular. Matthew pushed through the crowd, calling her name with more emotion than he'd ever used for me. Catherine's hands shook as she tried to smooth Lauren's hair, voice trembling. I knelt beside them, steady. Because I had to be. We need an ambulance, I said. Nobody argued. In the service elevator going down, Lauren's head rested against my shoulder. Her pulse was erratic under my fingers. I didn't let myself think about the poison yet. I just watched the numbers blink above the door and kept my breathing slow. Her glass. My glass. The swap. The powder settling into gold liquid. Decisions you make in a single breath don't disappear just because the room changes. At the ambulance bay, paramedics took her from me, wheeling her inside under fluorescent lights that made everything look too sharp. Catherine trailed after them, begging for answers. Matthew stayed behind, gripping the railing like the whole building had tilted. "You switched the glasses," he said. Not a question. I didn't answer. Silence was safer. His face went white. Really white. Because he understood what that meant, that I knew. That I'd seen everything. Inside the emergency room, everything moved fast but felt slow. Monitors beeped. Nurses moved with focused efficiency. Dr. Brown, calm but alert, examined Lauren with the kind of focus that leaves no room for panic. "She collapsed suddenly?" he asked. "Yes." "Any prior medical conditions?" "No." The symptoms escalated quickly. Confusion, tremors, elevated heart rate that wouldn't stabilize. Dr. Brown's eyes narrowed slightly, professional instincts catching something beneath the surface. "This looks like exposure to an anticholinergic compound," he murmured, half to himself. My throat tightened. "Check for modified derivatives," I said quietly. "Not commercial ones. Research grade." Dr. Brown paused. Looked at me directly. "Why?" "Because the man standing a few feet away had access to compounds nobody outside the family lab should handle. Because I watched him tip white powder into a glass with the ease of someone who'd rehearsed it." "But I didn't say that." "Just check," I said. He nodded and started issuing orders. Detective Reeves arrived 20 minutes later, notebook in hand. His questions were gentle at first, routine, procedural. But then I motioned to my friends Nancy and Amber, who'd both been at the party. Nancy handed him her phone without saying a word. The video played silently. Matthew selecting the glass, placing it near the edge of the tray, the subtle drift of powder. Then me, smiling, switching the glasses, lifting a different flute to my lips while Lauren drank from mine. Detective Reeves rewound the clip, watched it twice more. His expression tightened. "I'll need copies of all recordings," he said. "They're already in your inbox," Amber replied. I hadn't asked them to do that. They just knew. As they stepped away with the detective, I sank into one of the waiting room chairs. The vinyl was cold against my palms. A vending machine hummed near the wall. Those small sounds grounded me more than anything else could. Matthew and Catherine sat across from me. He kept his eyes on the floor. She kept staring at the entrance to Lauren's room. "You've misunderstood something," Catherine whispered eventually. I didn't respond. "We would never harm our own family," she added, louder this time. Still, I stayed silent. The lie hung in the air between us, so obvious it almost felt ridiculous. Hours bled together. Tests were run. Samples processed. More detectives came. Agent Rollins from the Federal Environmental Division arrived with quiet authority that shifted the whole atmosphere. He reviewed the video, asked about internal documents, access history, the environmental reports I'd mentioned. I answered without embellishment, without emotion. Facts were enough. I told him about the water samples, about Ruth's journal, about the disposal records that never quite added up, about the threatening emails disguised as concerned advice. Everything I'd been collecting for months, just waiting for the right moment. This was that moment. By dawn, Lauren was stabilized. Groggy, confused, but alive. I stood by her bedside, watching her eyes flutter open. "It wasn't supposed to be you," I said softly. Her brows knit together weakly. She tried to speak but couldn't quite form the words. I didn't explain. She was still fighting the effects of the compound. Truth could wait for clarity. But I squeezed her hand, and she squeezed back. Weak, but there. Back in the waiting room, the city was waking up. Traffic humming somewhere far below. I pulled my laptop from my bag and started the work I'd been putting off for years. I opened files Ruth, a family friend who tried to warn me, had left in her journal. Scanned photocopies of water tests she'd kept at the lake house. Pulled up photos I'd taken of the West Facility's drainage site. I collected screenshots of emails. Threats masked as guidance. Offers disguised as commands. I organized everything into labeled folders: research, environment, trust, corporate missteps, family directives. Nothing dramatic. Just truth, waiting in neat stacks. I drafted a message to Allison, the attorney I'd quietly contacted weeks before graduation. We need to move forward now. I sent it without hesitation. One by one, I closed tabs tied to my family name and opened new ones tied to my future. I scheduled meetings with federal investigators. Downloaded copies of everything to an encrypted drive. Deleted old access links to family servers. I worked through sunrise, the waiting room empty except for a cleaning crew. When I finally stood, stretching my stiff shoulders, the weight I'd carried for years felt lighter. Not gone. Just no longer strapped to me by force. I looked toward the corridor where my parents sat with their lawyer. Their silhouettes were small from this distance. For the first time, they weren't the center of the frame. I stepped outside. The morning air was cool on my face. This time, I whispered into the quiet, I won't fix what they've broken. By midday, the hospital had shifted from quiet urgency to controlled investigation. Uniformed officers guarded Lauren's hallway. Detectives spoke in low tones near the nurse's station. Agent Rollins reviewed toxicology results with laser focus. Dr. Brown approached me first. The results are back, he said. Your sister was exposed to a modified anticholinergic compound. Research grade. Not available commercially. The room didn't spin. It just narrowed until all I could hear was the soft hum of overhead lights. We've seen preliminary data on similar compounds, Agent Rollins added. From labs tied to your family's company. Matthew and Catherine, seated nearby, stiffened. Detective Reeves tapped his pen against his tablet. We'll need statements. All of you. They took Matthew first. I watched him square his shoulders, slipping into the authority he'd worn his entire life. This is absurd, he began. Lauren must have had a reaction to the food or... Detective Reeves turned the tablet around. The video played silently. Matthew selecting the glass. The powder. My smile as I switched them. Lauren drinking. Clean. Irrefutable. Methodical. Matthew's face drained of color. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. For the first time in my life, I watched my father have absolutely nothing to say. She drank what was meant for me, I said. Calm. Factual. Catherine rose from her chair like she was being pulled by wires. You don't understand, she whispered. We were protecting the family. Everything was falling apart, the investigation, the reports. If those documents went public, so you tried to slow me down? I asked. Her silence was answer enough. Agent Rollins flipped through lab access logs. Mr. Wilson signed out the compound 3 days before the graduation party. And we've located a storage unit tied to falsified signatures. Documents. Research samples. Disposal records. All indicating attempts to shift liability. Matthew shot Catherine a look sharp enough to cut glass. You should have kept your mouth shut. She flinched. Detective Reeves closed his notebook. Both of you will be taken into custody pending formal charges. 2 officers stepped forward. Metal clasps clicked shut. Lauren, still weak, watched from her doorway. Eyes swollen but clear. When our parents were led past her, she didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at them like she was seeing strangers for the first time. Matthew turned toward me one last time. You did this? No, I said quietly. You did. Catherine reached for Lauren with trembling fingers. Sweetheart, please. Lauren stepped back. Away from her. Away from everything they represented. She didn't need to say anything. The distance was its own verdict. As the officers guided them away, the hallway felt suddenly wider. The air less constricted. No victory. No triumph. Just space. Clean, empty space where their shadows used to be. Agent Rollins handed me a card. We'll need your cooperation moving forward. You'll have it. He nodded once. Justice begins with clarity. You've given us that. When they were gone, I sank into a chair outside Lauren's room. Morning sun filtered through the blinds, leaving thin bars of light across the floor. Lauren sat beside me a moment later. Her hand found mine with steadiness she didn't yet have in her legs. Is it over? She whispered. No, I said. But it's beginning. The lake house was quieter than I remembered. Mornings came in pale layers, mist first, then thin blue light, then the slow reveal of the shoreline. I'd wrap my hands around a warm mug, sit on the wooden steps, and let the cold air settle against my skin. After months of sirens, courtrooms, and fluorescent hospital lights, the silence felt almost impossible. Lauren moved carefully those first weeks, still recovering, still building back the strength the compound had stolen. Sometimes I'd hear her pacing upstairs, old floorboards creaking with her steps. Sometimes she'd join me outside, wrapped in one of my sweaters, staring at the water without speaking. She'd traded her crisp business blouses for simple cotton shirts. Her hair, always perfectly smooth under Catherine's watch, now fell in loose waves. She looked like someone stepping out of a costume she didn't know she'd been wearing. We didn't talk much at first. Didn't need to. We were both learning how to exist in a space that wasn't constantly measured against us. My days took on a new rhythm. I worked remotely with a small environmental restoration group, drafting impact assessments, analyzing chemical footprints, developing cleanup plans for sites like the facility my family once operated. There was quiet satisfaction in using the knowledge I'd gained, knowledge they wanted to suppress, for something that restored rather than concealed. Every now and then, federal updates came in. Notices about seized accounts. Progress reports about soil remediation. Transcripts from former employees who finally felt safe enough to speak. I read each one slowly, without celebration. Just digesting a language I'd spent my whole life hearing through closed doors. Closure wasn't loud. It was administrative, procedural, steady. One evening, I walked the narrow path behind the house. Leaves crunched under my shoes. The lake caught the last red sliver of daylight. I stopped at the dock, breathing in cold water and pine. My reflection on the surface looked calmer than I expected. Older somehow, but lighter. The rooftop party felt far away now. Like a film I'd studied rather than lived through. The glass. The powder. The choice. I could still see each moment sharply, but the urgency had faded. In its place was something else. Not forgiveness. Not victory. Just release. Later, inside, I found Lauren at the kitchen table sorting through law school materials. She looked up and offered a tired but real smile. First time in months I saw her eyes without fear behind them. There's still a lot ahead, she said. I know. But it feels different now. It does. A breeze moved through the open window, lifting the edge of one of her notebooks. She held it down with her palm, steadying the page. I keep thinking about that night, she said quietly. About the glass. About what you did. I didn't say anything. You saved my life, she continued. But you knew what it meant. What would happen to them? Yeah, I said. I did. She nodded slowly. I'm not saying it was wrong. I'm just saying, it took courage I didn't know you had. I didn't either, I admitted. Until I needed it. For a long time, we just sat there. Listening to the quiet. The kind that doesn't ask anything of you. Doesn't hide anything from you. The kind that finally felt like ours. I used to think survival meant staying small. Staying quiet. Folding myself into whatever shape kept the peace. Now, standing on that dock with the lake breathing against the shore, I understand something simpler. Distance isn't abandonment. It's recovery. Truth doesn't need an audience to matter. It just needs space to stand. My family taught me how silence can wound. Life taught me how silence can heal. And somewhere between those two edges, I found a boundary that finally holds. The life ahead of me isn't loud or triumphant. It's mine. And that, at last, is enough. Thanks for listening, and if this story hit you the way it hit me, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below and share your thoughts, and subscribe for more stories about finding your voice when the world tries to silence you. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is save yourself, even when it means letting others face the consequences of their own choices.